All right, welcome to another Insider Notebook here at Bleacher Report. I'm James Palmer. Remember, we changed our times. We used to be noon Eastern on Wednesdays. We are now 2 o'clock Eastern on Tuesdays. So just remember that we're sliding up a little bit in the week. But to get you going for the entire week of football, we got the divisional rounds coming up, but we're going to talk a lot of what's going on behind the scenes across the NFL right now and what's going on with a lot of these head coaching hires, the cycle, the candidates, what teams are looking for. We have a lot of action. We had more of it today as Greg Roman was just let go by his good friend Jim Harbaugh, the offensive coordinator, out with the Los Angeles Chargers after a terrible offensive performance, just 3 points in that wild card game against the Patriots. I'll tell you why that happened and what else transpired there with the Chargers. We're going to get to the latest head coaching openings. We're going to go through some changes in Philly, Matt LaFleur, what's happening with those contract negotiations, and why everybody is still paying attention to it. Also, Sean McDermott, is he off the hot seat with that win over the Jacksonville Jaguars? And then what's next for the Chargers? I mentioned that. We'll get to what's happening with Greg Roman and the rest of the changes that possibly could be happening for Jim Harbaugh's staff. And then teams to undergo kind of an overhaul and what teams we're looking for there. Again, always go to the chat. The chat will always be open. I'll try to go to it in between each and every one of these topics that I'm going through. So let's go through these latest on the head coaching openings. Obviously, I'll start with John Harbaugh because that's kind of the name that everybody is kind of focused on. I think there's probably four teams that have the best chance of landing John Harbaugh. That would be the Giants, Falcons, Titans, and Dolphins. Now, what is John Harbaugh specifically looking for? Now, I don't want to say slow paying this process, but he's taking his time. He's being very deliberate as he's taking his time. And he's had kind of a conversation meeting with, I guess you call it somewhat of a meeting with the Falcons, but he's had conversations with almost every one of the openings. And what he's looking at is he's looking at the quarterback position with all of them, and he's evaluating the quarterback spot with all of them. And I think with the Raiders, actually, he was using Fernando Mendoza as kind of the quarterback placeholder as he was looking at them as an organization, as the potential maybe number one overall pick that the Raiders have. And what is he actually looking at? Well, remember, as he's taking his time with this, his agent, Brian Harlan, has the ability to go and probably talk to all these teams, really talk about what they have going on, what their interests are, what they can offer John Harbaugh. But he is looking for, to my understanding, something pretty similar to what he had for 18 years in Baltimore, and I don't think you could argue with that. He's looking for alignment. He's looking for stability. He's looking for great ownership like Steve Bisciotti, who, yes, did fire him over the phone, but at the same time, an owner that didn't meddle, that allowed the football people to do what they do, hired good football people. I think he's looking for a collaboration of some sort. There was a lot of collaboration there with Sashi Brown and the president and Eric DeCosta, the general manager. I think he's obviously looking at the quarterback stability. He thought the world of Lamar Jackson. I think that plays a part in it as well. I think he's looking for patience, stable type of place where this is a coach that has not bounced around a lot in his career. And I don't think he's looking to be, quickly removed of his duties again at his next stop. I think he likes that kind of spot where he can have the ability to kind of stay in one place. So he's had preliminary conversations with Giants, Titans, Browns, Raiders, Cardinals. And I think what we're going to see is as he deliberately moves, the rest of the landscape is going to move. That's kind of why I wanted to hit on him first. I think he is kind of the linchpin to what happens within this offseason in terms of these coaches kind of landing different places. I also want to talk about Mike McDaniel's been a fascinating, type of guy during this cycle as, he hung on there for a second. They reevaluated some things. They saw that the landscape was kind of changing in essence and that John Harbaugh became available, what's happening in Green Bay, all of these different things. And the Dolphins kind of reevaluated everything and then moved on from Mike McDaniel. There was some reporting that was contradictory about Mike's, viability as a head coach in his next spot. I put out that I think there's enough people around the NFL that think stop two would be very good for Mike McDaniel. I agree with that. That's why I put it out. And I think other teams have. I mean, he's completed an interview with the Falcons. He has scheduled interviews with the Ravens, Browns, Titans, and then the Lions offensive coordinator job. That's the one I kind of have circled because if the Lions really want to make a splash, they kind of had Johnny Morton as the one that they wanted to replace Ben Johnson. I think they realized how difficult it is to replace Ben Johnson. I think if they want to make a splash, they might have to really overpay. But man, Mike McDaniel with that offense, with Jared Goff, with Jahmyr Gibbs. Good grief, that would be absolutely outstanding. I do think that the Lions are going to go outside the box a little bit, and that's why Mike would be kind of one that fits that box. Would a Josh McCown be somebody that fits that box? I think it's going to be interesting. I think Cleveland is an interesting spot, and we can get into Cleveland as well because I just find that spot very fascinating because of Jim Schwartz and the element that he brings. I think Schwartz, they want to keep him. This is an outstanding defense, and he's an outstanding defensive coach. And I think that's why they're probably leaning more towards offensive minds. And maybe if you go and look at a defensive coach and you go, I want to hire this guy, how's that going to impact Jim Schwartz? How is that going to impact him wanting to stay with the organization when that's your plan? I think they might have to lean to the offensive side if they want to keep Jim Schwartz in the building coaching that outstanding defense. And maybe they even look at him as the head coach. I mean, it would be his second go as a head coach. They look for a good offensive coordinator to run the other side of the ball. I wouldn't throw that out of the realm of possibility. I'd say it's probably less likely, but I think that's kind of where Cleveland stands. And maybe that Mike is kind of one of those guys that would possibly be able to fit that mold when we have a little bit more limited offensive minds in what we're looking for right now. We kind of have breaking news, and I'm kind of looking at this right now. Um, let's see here. Mike Tomlin just informed the team that he is stepping down as Steelers head coach. Whew, Steelers will now be looking for only their fourth head coach since 1969. Let's talk about A.J. Brown of cancer. We'll get to some of this stuff, but we got to talk about Mike Tomlin. This was something that I remember talking to you guys on these streams going, these are two teams we have to keep an eye on, the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's just a different feel around each one of those buildings. And that was the case. That's the way people around those buildings were feeling. They didn't really have a whole lot of information on it, but there was just a different feeling around the Steelers building this year, maybe a little bit different feeling around the Ravens building this year. Now, we saw after the game, I was watching probably like all of you, where Aaron Rodgers went on his long soliloquy, if you will, about it would be insane to say Mike Tomlin's seat is hot, to say Matt LaFleur's seat is hot, his old coach in Green Bay. He said, a lot of the internet people are kind of creating these things. These guys have done, amazing things in the NFL, and there's no reason their seats should be hot. I don't know. It was never going to be the case that the Steelers are going to fire Mike Tomlin. That was my understanding for some time. They were never going to fire him. He was going to have a huge say in the room. And from Adam Schefter's report, which I got to give him credit because that's where I saw it right here as I'm doing this, with you guys right now, is that it's really about him having a say in the room. He was always going to have a say in the room. And you had to see where things were going with this Steelers team. It's an aging roster with a lot of older players on it. They still haven't found the quarterback. If they're looking for a full reset for everybody involved, possibly that's what is most likely going to happen. And that seems to be what happened. Now, Mike has options. He certainly can go to television, like everybody said. He could do that for a year. He could take a year off. He could jump right into the rest of this situation. Hell, he could go over to the Ravens. And he might be exactly what they're looking for. And so Mike Tomlin, once again, just like John Harbaugh, throws this entire landscape really for a loop. And that's why some of these teams, like Miami, was kind of patient. And some of these teams are kind of feeling out the entire situation. But what was happening in Pittsburgh was always something that we are going to be curious about. Because yes, the 19 seasons of 500 or better certainly happened, which is a remarkable run. But they haven't been able to do anything in the postseason over the last several years. I think TJ Watt's 0-5 in the postseason, and now Mike Tomlin and the Steelers part ways. This is a major shakeup. We're up to 9 now, where we stand right now in the coaching landscape. That kind of kicks me to the co-pilot question, which has kind of changed now because I wanted to ask when was the last time the NFL had 8 or more head coaching vacancies in one season. According to Copilot, the last time the NFL had 8 or more, which this is more now because we're at 9, head coaching vacancies in a single offseason was during the 2014 coaching carousel. So now we are up to 9. I'm kind of curious what everybody's saying. AJ to the Raiders. Oh, we got a lot of AJ Brown stuff in here. Please tell me the Broncos will trade for a wide receiver. I don't think that's what the Broncos are thinking about right now. Harbaugh to Arizona. I don't think that's really anywhere near the top of his list. I mentioned the 4 probably most likely landing spots for him in terms of Harbaugh are probably most likely Atlanta, New York, Miami, or Tennessee. Those seem to be the most likely landing spots for him right now. New Orleans Saints need him. I'm talking about a lot of AJ Brown. We'll get on this AJ Brown stuff if you want to. We'll get to it. All right. that's the Tomlin stuff. Obviously, we'll continue to. You got any questions on it? We can continue to go look for this. But also, Kevin Stefanski is kind of the next guy after John Harbaugh, but we don't know what Mike Tomlin's doing right now, so that obviously could dramatically change everything that's going on there. But right now, Kevin Stefanski, I believe, is interviewing with the Dolphins today. He already interviewed with the Falcons, Ravens, Giants, and Titans. He can do that because he's been let go of his duties up there in Cleveland. I do think what happens with the Packers and then Harbaugh, and then he might be the next shoe to drop. Again, Tomlin throws this all for a loop, but that's kind of where things are slated with Kevin Stefanski. I do think, obviously, there's a thought process with the type of offense that he runs. Is that something Matt Ryan, who's now there in charge in Atlanta, would be interested in? Possibly, because that's where he had some of his most success, that Kyle Shanahan, Mike Shanahan, Gary Kubiak type of system that Kevin Stefanski is known for. And maybe that's the type of offense and system he wants to see run there, as he's going to be the one making the shots, making the call on the shots there in Atlanta. Marcus Freeman is still somebody that I would keep an eye on. I don't think it's likely by any stretch, but I think teams are very interested. I would say the Ravens probably are interested. The Giants were very interested, but he kind of fits that Ravens mold as well. If I'm going to predict some spots, I would say Ravens right now. Jesse Minter kind of seems like the front runner. I know it's odd that he was brought into the league by Harbaugh, and then he's coaching for Jim Harbaugh, but there's just ties back there. He has a great relationship, to my understanding, with Lamar Jackson. I think that weighs heavily to what the Ravens are looking for. I think he understands the way the Ravens operate. I could see that being certainly a fit, and I've talked to people there that believe he has that it factor, and they could be looking for 2 new coordinators if he ends up landing a job, which Jim Harbaugh expects him to. We'll end up finding out what happens there. But he does appreciate Steve Bisciotti, that CEO type, and that could be something Jesse Minter could do, as well as running that defense, somebody that collaborates very well. I do think whoever comes in, if it's somebody like Minter, they're going to need a hotshot type offensive coordinator to work with Lamar. I think the head coach and the OC need to be a good fit for Lamar Jackson. I think that's pretty high on their list, but Jesse would be an interesting one. I still think John Harbaugh is the betting favorite for the Giants. Again, that could shift with this new news of Mike Tomlin, but to my understanding, the Giants have been on a full court press for what's going on with the pursuit of John Harbaugh, and he checks a lot of boxes that they're looking for. And I know some people question the Joe Shane still being in the general manager spot. What does John Harbaugh want from that? Some of these arranged marriages have worked out very well. Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson so far. Sean Payton and George Payton in Denver has worked out very well. I think Elliott Wolf and Mike Vrabel have worked out well there. So it's not like it won't happen. It's not like it couldn't change after a year or two. But I think there isn't. I don't think it's something that would like really tie up everything. I think he checks a lot of boxes that they're looking for, and they're kind of looking for that authoritative figure they've had success for in the past. All right, let's get to changes in Philly. Everybody's looking for that, but hey, James, you didn't say how much for that Banksy behind you. That Banksy is a Nixon Palmer, baby. That is painted by my son, who's an artist here in Denver. Talented 13-year-old, huh? How about Raiders updates? I would say this. With Tom running the show and John Spytek, obviously his old college roommate buddy, running the show alongside him, I think some people thought like this would be a widespread look, and I think it will be. I think you could say maybe Jesse Minter's name falls there as well. I could see them even landing somebody like going and being like, Davis Webb checks a lot of boxes for us in terms of his knowledge at the quarterback position, and that how valuable that's going to be with our number 1 pick, and that possibly most likely being a quarterback. That would be something that I would keep an eye on as well. But I do think the perception around the league, as you asked for a Raiders update, is essentially this. The job perception this year is very different than what it's been in years past. They have much more liquid cash than they've had in years past. That's a very valuable thing. Tom Brady leading this charge changes things dramatically because of the respect he has around the NFL. I would also say the facilities, the cash cow that stadium is. I do think this is a different Raiders job than years past, and I think that will help them in their pursuit. Remember, they wanted Ben Johnson, couldn't get him. What do we got? All right, let's get to what's going on in Philly right now, because that's kind of a massive deal of what's happening there. A lot of people are expecting offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo to be fired and to be let go. I don't think that's an outrageous statement. I do know as of yesterday they were really just mulling all of their options and seeing where things stand. But I think you could say this: Nick Sirianni, who has the best winning percentage of any coach that's currently coaching in the NFL, that is a fact. And Jalen Hurts, who's a Super Bowl MVP, have more equity within this offense than say Kevin Patullo. When he's running it this year, it's the least productive and least efficient it has been in the 5 years of Nick Sirianni being there. Obviously, a lot went wrong on this offense. We've seen everything that everybody's broken down film-wise, how predictable they've gotten at times, and things like that. I would say that this is a change that a lot of people around the league are expecting, but nobody in Philadelphia has made that decision just yet. I'm very curious because speaking to someone there, there's interest in wondering with Jalen Hurts and maybe some of the limitations he has if he's not going to run anymore in terms of him as a passer. What is the marketability of this offensive coordinator job? Some people are curious what type of candidates that they can bring in when you see Kellen Moore come in 2 years ago. And obviously they won a Super Bowl. But if you talk to other offensive minds around the league, they'll tell you Kellen couldn't really be himself in Philadelphia. I thought he did a brilliant job coaching and adjusting to the way this offense runs and adjusting to the strengths of Jalen Hurts and being able to hide the deficiencies of Jalen Hurts. I thought he did a brilliant job. But that also is an example of what you might have to do as a coach, as the offensive play caller, when you come into Philadelphia about the way that offense has to be run because of the quarterback. Yes, there's talent, but it's interesting. With A.J. Brown, I know a lot of people think that this is the end of him in Philadelphia. I'm not entirely certain. Finances play a big part in this. There will be a $43.5 million cap hit if they end up trading him. Yes, you can negotiate some of those things within a trade. I would say this. I think you brought in Nick Sirianni, and his biggest really trait is managing that room and managing personalities. Yes, him and A.J. Brown have gone at it, but I think him and A.J. Brown have a better relationship than a lot of people think. I don't think Nick went after his receiver for something foolish like getting off the field during a punt in a moment where the receiver's very upset. Probably wouldn't have wanted to do that, but either or. I would say also they've been starving for a receiver like A.J. Brown for years before they got him. He's one of 5 receivers that has 1,000 yards each of the last 4 seasons. It's him, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Justin Jefferson. That's it. That's the end of the list. And I would look at the quarterbacks that those guys played with, whether it's Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, and I would say Justin Jefferson's played with a couple of different guys. Most of those guys are better than Jalen Hurts. So A.J. Brown's a really good receiver. We'll see what ends up happening moving forward. But I think the finances are a big part of this because they have a lot of big ticket type of contracts that are coming up. All right, what else do you guys have before I get to LaFleur? Dallas wants Orr. I think Dallas is looking at several different defensive coordinators. I think it's Jonathan Gannon on their radar as well. When does Harbaugh make his decision? Here's the deal. He actually can't, and I like that you said that because of him being kind of a linchpin to this. You really can't hire anybody before the 19th. If you have to really fulfill the Rooney Rule. So I think we're still waiting for this entire week. I think Harbaugh is taking his time. The back end of this week will start to be more of his meetings and his official interviews with these teams. And again, before the 19th, you really can't hire anybody, to be honest. And so that's kind of the way this thing is all slated right now. Dallas, D.C., I think they have plenty of options, and I think they're looking at all of them. I think Raheem Morris is an option. I think Albrecht, what he did in Atlanta, is an option. I mentioned Gannon. I mean, like, they have a lot of different guys they want to look at, and I know they're taking their time looking at this because I think they believe the right guy with the personnel that they have, with as talented as they are at D tackle and where they are at a couple of different spots, the specific vision they're looking for, and I think that's why they can take a moment to figure out what they're going to do here. What do we got? They're not better than Hurts. Oh, I think you're right. I do not think Joe Burrow is better than Jalen Hurts. Let's go. Mine should have been fired 5 years ago. What else do we got? What else do you guys got? Latest on Falcons coaching search. I think this one's interesting. I mentioned them being still, and I mentioned that I think Stefanski's there or something. No, Stefanski's with Miami right now. This is so hard to keep track of. He interviewed there. Other guys have gone through and interviewed there. The structure that has been put in place is going to be fascinating. Let's use John Harbaugh as a direct example. He only, and I think he is in the running probably in Atlanta, he only has reported to the general manager, not the general manager, to the owner, Steve Bisciotti in Baltimore. The structure in Atlanta is going to be the GM and the head coach both report to Matt Ryan, the president of football. Does John Harbaugh want that structure? Does he want to report to Matt Ryan, who he coached against, I guess, and has no front office experience? Is that something that at 63 years old, John Harbaugh wants to do? I think the structure in Atlanta is going to play a big factor in what they do with in terms of candidates. And what do the candidates think of Michael Penix? That's a massive part of this evaluation as well, what the candidates think of Michael Penix. And that's what they're all trying to have that discussion right now. But I threw that Harbaugh thing in there just because Atlanta's structure is just a little bit different. All right, what else do we got a lot in here. Let's see. Kubiak or Flores to Baltimore, I believe you said. I could see Clint Kubiak landing in Miami. I could see him being the one that possibly lands in Atlanta because of some of the things that we mentioned in terms of the familiarity with kind of the system that Clint runs and the way that he can get the most out of a quarterback within an offense that can do some things. I would be excited to see Clint Kubiak actually run that Falcons offense. I think that would be kind of cool. I see Tomlin to Baltimore. He actually checks a lot of their boxes. It'd be fascinating if they did it, but he checks a lot of boxes. Joe Burrow isn't available enough to say he's better. I mean, you can say he's better at football, but yes, the injuries have been a big issue. And these aren't my opinions about Jalen Hurts. These are people I talk to around the NFL. All right, look, we're way behind here. LaFleur staying in Green Bay. It looks to be the case right now, but I wouldn't say anything is done until a contract is signed. And I think that's the same thing that other people around the NFL are thinking. This is a guy, if you look at all the coaches in the NFL that have coached 100 games in their career or more, he has 11th best winning percentage of all time. He's going to use that during these contract negotiations to say I should be up here near the higher echelon guys. And then Ed Policy, their acting president and first year into the job, is going to say, well, you're 3-6 in the postseason. So where's that number lie? I think what the offer is from the Packers is going to be very telling, and I think the rest of the league is going to know what that offer is very quickly, and they're going to know if they have an availability towards Matt LaFleur. And I'm just fascinated if teams are going to call and see that and remember the success that the Broncos had when they traded for Sean Payton and they gave up 2 first-round picks for Sean Payton. You know what? The Packers gave up 2 first-round picks for Micah Parsons. They could get those first-round picks back if they trade Matt LaFleur. Keep Jeff Hafley as their next head coach, who's a hot commodity in this coaching cycle, and maybe they move on in that sense. Do I think they want Matt LaFleur and they want to keep him and they believe he's a good head coach? I certainly do. But I don't think that'll stop teams from being curious about what happens. And until that door's completely shut and that contract is negotiated fully, I do think some teams are going to take their time in what they're doing. But I do believe that the Packers want him back and think he's a good head coach. I think that locker room thinks he's a really good head coach. Hell, the rest of the NFL I talk to thinks he's a really good head coach. But again, that's why teams won't probably let this die until a contract is officially signed, which is what they're going to be working on right now. Sean McDermott off the hot seat, yes. And I don't think the seat was ever really all that hot in the first place. I know that he is beloved in that building. I know that the Pagulas are very patient. Look what they were with the Sabres. They were extremely patient with their general manager there, who was a train wreck for several seasons. I think they understand kind of the level-headedness of McDermott and how well liked he is by them and the rest of that building. I don't think his seat was ever really all that hot, but then this win, I think, cooled that off entirely. All right, to the Chargers now, because I want to go through some of these and then just get to all your questions here. Greg Roman's been let go. Offensive coordinator Mike Devlin's been let go. Something needed to happen. You saw that performance out there. And yes, Greg Roman was dealing with a lot. They've had like 30 line changes. They've lost 2 of the best tackles in all of football for the whole season in Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater. And Justin Herbert was just getting annihilated the entire season. I had a tweet that went out that was put up by a lot of people during this game. If you remember, I think he was hit 19 times more than any other quarterback in football. I believe he was pressured like 38 more times than any other quarterback in football. He was running for his life the entire season. I think some of the play calling kind of made some people scratch their heads in that game. I think some of the lack of creativity at times made people scratch their heads. Did Justin Herbert miss a lot of throws? I certainly think so. But my buddy Dan Popper, who writes for The Athletic and works with me over there, had a great article come up, and he had a lot of quotes that I read yesterday where there were not a lot of glowing endorsements for Greg Roman from players in that locker room. John Harbaugh and Jim Harbaugh are players' coaches. They listen to what's happening in their locker room, and it didn't seem like there was a whole lot of love for the offensive coordinator and what was going on there. Yes, they dealt with a ton of adversity, but I think they understand that they need to be better as a group offensively in terms of how they're going to run this entire group. So now Justin Herbert goes into his, I believe, 7th season in the NFL. It'll be on his 5th offensive coordinator. Not really how you want to start your career, but that's where it's at right now. And I mentioned on the defensive side of the ball, they could be losing Jesse Minter, who a lot of teams are absolutely in love with and really want to get to know him even further and think he could be a coaching star. There's people in that building with the Chargers that think he could be a star. So they could be searching for both coordinators along the likes of, Washington was searching at one point for both their coordinators. And so there's a lot of changes that are going on. There's a lot of overhaul that's happening. I think Washington's a team that you got to keep an eye on when we talk about teams undergoing overhauls. Obviously, with the coordinators and an aging roster, that's big. With Mike Tomlin now departing, The Steelers really jumped to kind of to me the top of the list in terms of a team that might have an overhaul. You got a lot of aging players on that roster. You kind of went all in this year when you had, you made a move for Slay, you made a move for Ramsey, you extended T.J. Watt into his third contract. Hayward's really up there in age, and obviously you have Aaron Rodgers, who's up there as well. And now you're going to be looking possibly for a new coaching staff, something this organization just doesn't do very often, like ever, and possibly a new quarterback, because I would highly doubt Aaron Rodgers is coming back to the Pittsburgh Steelers without Mike Tomlin, if you know anything about that relationship, if you know anything about why Aaron picked going to Pittsburgh. So I think that might be the team that has maybe the biggest change of what's going on out there. I gave myself 5 minutes here to answer your questions, which is what I kind of wanted to do. Browns head coaching search, and what's going on with Dable. Feel like it's been quiet. He actually has an interview or two, if I remember. I wrote it down here. Where did I put it? Yeah, he's scheduled to interview for the Titans head coaching job, which they are casting a very wide net. I think they're over 15 candidates. I think Dable has a very good chance of landing an offensive coordinator job with one of these places. I think that's certainly in play. I don't think he's ruled out in the head coaching search. I think teams are curious. Is it likely? Possibly not. But I think Dable does have definitely plenty of offensive spots that he could possibly land. Tom Monaball, we mentioned that. What else do we have here? McDaniel to the Chargers, man, that'd be fun. I think Mike McDaniel, and he's obviously has all these different spots. He has interviewed and has scheduled to interview. Again, he completed with the Falcons. He's scheduled with the Ravens, Browns, Titans, and then the Lions offense coordinator job. I think his offensive mind is going to be highly sought after if he doesn't land a head coaching job, which might be more likely that he's an OC than a head coach. But I think there's going to be multiple teams that are going to be interested in his creativity, his ability to play with a quarterback like Tua Tagovailoa, who is limited in a lot of what he can do. So we'll see. Davis Webb would be a perfect fit for the Steelers or Ravens as a Broncos fan. There is more real interest in Davis Webb than probably people outside elite circles think. I think he could go to the Raiders as their head coach. I think he could go to a place like the Ravens as their head coach. The Ravens go outside of the box. They break the norm. They did it 18 years ago when they hired Harbaugh, who's a special teams coordinator. I think he is really liked because of the way he played the position, which essentially was in the room with some really good players, i.e. Josh Allen, Eli Manning, different type of guys that he was around. Oh, yeah, he was roommates in college with Patrick Mahomes. So he's been around some of the best quarterbacks and played the position at a high level. And then he has the other side of it. This is the analytics side, the kind of computer-based analytics side. And he has worked brilliantly with Bo Nix in these first 2 years, side by side with him. He's been under Sean Payton. He checks a lot of boxes. And I know his interview in Denver for that quarterback job went so well that they intercepted the car on the way to the airport and made it turn around and come back and hired him on the spot so he wouldn't leave. He impresses in interviews big time. Tom and Mike to Atlanta. He's going to be a great coach. Biggest mistake was holding on to Ben Roethlisberger for too long. Dable in Philly would be a huge experience. With Hurts. That's an interesting one. Yeah, I do think what they're going to look for, and they saw what they had success with when they had Kellen Moore come in there to Philadelphia, was an experienced play caller who's worked in different offenses and can be very malleable and adjustable. And I think you have to be that the way you coach Jalen Hurts. Are there parts of his game that are outstanding? Yeah, if there's one of the best deep balls in all of football, I think he has an unbelievable ability to protect the football more often than not. He has those winning traits to just find ways to win. But I do think you got to find ways to be a little bit more successful with him, and you lean on what he's great at. I think an experienced play caller, if they make a change, and a lot of people expect that, that's exactly what they're going to do. Is this the first time 3 or 4 coaches in the same division gone in one offseason? I think that's pretty remarkable, right? That entire North is it's just been thrown for an entire loop here. And Zach Taylor is the one that ends up keeping his job. And keep an eye on that. He has 2 years left on his contract. A lot of people believe there's certain coaches that just have that their eye on that job over the next year or 2 or 2 years to work with Joe Burrow, to be there with him. But again, 2 more years left on his deal. That's kind of where that stands, where he's at. Let's see if anybody's got any here. Chance of Oh, Ejiro Evero leaving. I don't see it happening. He did sign the contract extension. Just did my show 89 with Steve Smith, who knows everything about the Panthers inside and out. And he was kind of telling me about the different pieces that he's heard that they'd like to add to that defense and keep E there to run that group because they do believe that they're on to something in the way they're playing. They definitely need an edge rusher. Like, keep an eye on them looking for an experienced edge rusher to kind of join that group, an off the ball linebacker that can make some plays. You have a great player in J.C. Horn. Brown's been outstanding. Can you get a running mate for Brown up front? I do think Carolina likes him. I think it's more likely he stays. Glad to see Tomlin is gone. Thank God. Man, so many people want a guy who's just an outstanding coach gone, but I get it. You've been having a lot of the same there in Pittsburgh. What's the situation? Cleveland got to that. Can't fire me if I step down. He was never going to get fired. I'll just be honest. Just know, like, even if they wanted him gone, there was never going to be a public, we're firing you. It's too much respect between him and the Rooney family and everything that's gone on there. It was always going to be either a mutual parting of ways or he's stepping down. He was always going to have a say in the room. That's the way it was always going to be. I just love that they use stepping away. That's pretty much kind of it. That's what you get after that amount of time. If the Eagles fire Sirianni, who will replace him? I don't see how you fire Nick Sirianni. I really I don't get this take here. And I know that he was, been on this wild. He's been on the hot seat a couple of times, even though in 5 years he's been to two Super Bowls, won one. He literally has one of the best winning percentages in the history of the NFL. And all they've done is shuffle through offensive coordinators and defense coordinators for that matter. When you have a lot of success, guys get poached. They've had a ton of people poached out of the coordinator spots. I don't think Nick Sirianni's going anywhere. It's just been a very fascinating run for a guy who's very fiery in a city that obviously loves to stir it up. That's my hometown. I definitely know that. Is there anything else before we can't believe they both gone AFC North? Will not be the same. Yeah, the AFC North just this grinded out type of vibe that division has always had. Is that going to change? I think that's a great question to ask because the likes of John Harbaugh and the likes of Mike Tomlin, the way they coached and where the other two teams are in Ohio, like it always just had this drag it out type of feel to it. Is that going to remain the same without both of them? I think it's a fascinating question. With this loaded head coaches, I think Vance Joseph stays in Denver. Vance has had a lot of interviews. I think he has a lot of interest from a lot of teams around the league. But the way the landscape has changed, and now you have if Tomlin wants to be a part of the mix, and Stefanski's part of the mix, and John Harbaugh is part of the mix, and Jesse Minter's the up and coming, really really hot name that's out there, and Jeff Hafley seems to be a lot of people like. I think it might be tough for Vance Joseph to land a job within this cycle. Who's the front runner in Atlanta? I do think it's one of the spots that Harbaugh is considering. Omar Khan, Mike T, front office. We need a new life on offense. Interesting. Brian Flores to the Steelers. That's an interesting one for sure. I think Flo actually has some very real type of situations he can land in. I could see him landing with the Raiders. There's a relationship, there's a familiarity there with him and going back to the Patriot days. And so I can see him having some realistic spots. If he doesn't get one though, I wouldn't see him taking a lateral move to one of these other defensive jobs. I think there's a greater chance. I'm not ruling it out. I'm just think there's a greater chance if he remains a defensive coordinator, he goes back and signs with the Vikings as their defensive coordinator. I think they'd love that. But I think there is real interest in him for sure. Who is the lead for Arizona? I don't think there is a lead in Arizona right now. I have my notes. And I think that one's pretty wide open. Let me see if I can find where I had it. And this will be the kind of the last one that I have here. Coaches, where do I? Here we go. Bear with me, guys, as I find this because I have so many notes on everything that is going on here. Because I want to answer a Cardinals question. Yeah, it's pretty from what I've written, it's pretty wide open. I think you need to have a plan for the quarterback. Certainly, that's a big part of this. I think they've put something in place. I would say the issues with the Cardinals is right now it's not a very desirable job when you look at the likes of the Steelers or the Giants or the Ravens. You could even say potentially the Dolphins and Falcons. And then the Titans, you're getting a complete reset. And actually players are more interested in, coaches more interested in Tennessee than you may think. What else do we have? And then, yes, after the crucial drops in a playoff game, he will not be back, in my opinion. Bad drops. You can't argue with it. They certainly were. They were bad drops. If you're a top five receiver in this league, which I think AJ Brown has been considered for a number of years, I think you do have to make those plays. I just think financially it might be tough. I think relationshiply it might be very tough to keep him. Financially, tough to get rid of him. I think there's a big decision for Howie Roseman, and you might have to lean on some of the traits of your head coach to try to figure this thing out as well. But I think it's going to be, everybody wanting AJ Brown out of Philadelphia. By the way, just has to remember, and again, my hometown. Yeah, we're starving for a number one receiver like this since T.O. left, and then they get one, and then happens. Too much of a cap hit to trade. The cap hit would be 43.5 million, which is huge. You could obviously spread it out between two, but if you trade him before the deadline, before June 1st, you can't spread it out too. If you cut him, you can spread it out too, but I don't think you're cutting them, right? So yeah, it's gonna be interesting because the cap hit is massive. Okay. Man, so many different in here. I wish I could get him. Kubiak to Vegas. I think Clint is a top type of guy. I don't see a lot of connections between Kubiak and Vegas, and I always look at those sometimes. So we'll see. All right, I think we get through this. Mike McDaniel seems like a perfect fit for Atlanta. I'll leave you this. I think there's a lot of people around the league that think Mike made some mistakes early in his time in Miami, whether it was making decisions within personnel or how the locker room and the culture were set up. Mike is also an unbelievably bright person. I would say a lot of that he learned very quickly, and some of it maybe wasn't irreversible in the same building, but is able to start anew in a different building. I think he has that ability. All right, we've gone way long, but I love talking about this with you guys, and we're going to do it again Tuesday at 2 o'clock Eastern time. We'll have probably some more information for sure with this thing getting pushed down the line. But again, the 19th, keep that kind of circled. I don't think anybody's really getting hired probably before that, possibly, because you do have to fulfill certain Rooney Rule obligations. Okay, everybody, take it easy. Great chatting with you. Love the questions. Love everything that you put out there. Appreciate it, and take it easy.